Greetings YouTube and welcome to the Blue Corner and to a Cardfight Vanguard deck profile and update for current format as the ban list has kicked in, at least has been for a little bit, and that means that one of the decks that I own gets a little buff, which is going to be Gandiva. So Gandiva got a bit of a buff on the last ban list as Stigurna went to 2 copies, which is kind of ironic because the deck right now is at a point where you sometimes don't even see it get played because of what has happened since the last time I posted a profile on Gandiva, which was a fairly long time ago. I didn't realize that I had posted content from before he had gotten his 1 or 2 pieces of support since. There was like one promo card grade 2 that doesn't see play anymore, whereas there is a core set grade 2 that sees play. Yeah, DZBT2. That's when Gandiva got like a really good shot in the arm, and then not that long ago, DZBT6 came out in which Gandiva actually got a dedicated wave of support because he got a mask upgrade. And because of how the mask engine works, Stigurna, you don't really see him in a lot of lists because he's 2 more slots that occupies up your engine space. Like, this deck's engine is massive now because of the mask searcher, the mask grade 3, and the fact that you want to play multiple copies of base Gandiva for your mask and how it works. It's not like Leonor mask where you have to have your one turn as the base grade 3 and then you go on the mask and stay on it the whole game. In this deck, you're switching back and forth between Gandiva and Gandiva masks. So as a result, you don't get to play as very much non-engine. I'm talking like cyclers and generics. This build of the deck is playing no non-engine aside from an ace unit. I figured I'd show you guys a build like this and tell you what you can run in slots, because with the exception of like the ace unit and like generic Dragon Empire stuff, I'd say that this deck is actually fairly budget now. Gandiva was already Gandiva in its day was fairly inexpensive to build. If you skipped getting cyclers, it was just Gandiva himself that was an amount of money, but otherwise the deck was fairly cheap and good for its time, and it honestly still is. Like, Gandiva, it's a bit more of like a piece reliant combo deck, but if you see your pieces and you get your engine rolling and your opponent doesn't sack the shit out of you, you actually still put up a fight against a lot of decks just because of how this deck works. It's able to do its thing on turn 3, which is very good against decks that need that setup turn, like Bob Sagra if they're going first, or like Ravzael's turn 3 and what have you. Playing a very long game against those decks does get rougher because they scale higher and quicker than you do, but your burst turn is impressive, and against slower decks, you just bowl them over with massive numbers. Plus, you've got retire, like you're a board control deck. You can clear cards out, and if this engine does its thing, you get to pop like anywhere between 3 to 5 cards in a turn. So decks that like do not recur their resources very easily, it gets rough because you just wipe their board every turn. So yeah, with that being said, let's go over the deck. So I'm gonna go over the ride line. For the grade 0, doesn't matter what you play. I play the Bob Sagra starter from her recent wave of support because it can sometimes psych people out into thinking I'm playing Bob Sagra, and they might adjust their like playstyle accordingly. Doesn't really matter because once I go into the next turn, I'm no longer on Bob Sagra. For the grade 1, you can either play the Vergilla starter or Gandiva starter. I'm playing Gandiva starter because I've noticed that a lot of decks don't really like commit hard early game aside from like dedicated rush decks, and there aren't many of that in the moment. So I'm playing Gandiva starter, whose effect is if your opponent has 1 or less rear guards, you can ride to your grade 2 for free. And the other reason that it is, he's got Scarlet Flame in the name, and that does matter for one of the grade 1s I'm playing in the deck. If your opponent has more than they have 2 or more rear guards and you ride to the grade 2, you can call them out instead, which isn't the worst because Gandiva doesn't really have boosters. Your grade 1 slots are almost non-existent. And then the grade 2, I've gone over them before. If you ride Gandiva on top of him, Gandiva's axe skill becomes free for the turn, which is very nice. It allows you to keep damage low, and then like pop your opponent's board on turn 3. Yeah, because your new boss monster is doesn't use counterblast. In fact, this deck itself doesn't really use a lot of counterblast. It's just Gandiva and then one of your multi-attackers. That's it. Yeah, not much to say here. Gandiva himself is still pretty okay. He's able to pop cards. He gets big. If you get to 5 cards in your bind zone face down, he gets a static crit for pretty much the whole game. That will be something that can just scare your opponent. This is a deck that can also play Drag Veda, and restanding Vanguards with a crit are very good. Look at Balsagra. So that's it for the ride line. Any changes you can make would be to just replace the 1 and the 2 with the Vergillas, but I don't play enough grade 2s, I feel, to justify the Vergilla grade 2. And if you play the Vergilla grade 2, you also have to be mindful of how much more counterblast you're using. I would recommend finding room for one of Gandiva's counterchargers if you're doing that. Then for the grade 3s, 4 more copies, the rest of copies of Gandiva. You aren't really looking to persona ride it, but you do want more because you want to be able to exile a Gandiva every turn for your masks to get its effect off. And then, yeah, your game plan is after you've done your mask turn, the next turn you ride into Gandiva, pop a couple cards, and then go into Gandiva masks and pop more cards. So let's just get into the main star of the deck, which is Gandiva masks. Yes, that's a giant ass text box. They had to do a lot for this guy. So, like any mask unit, it can only be written upon a card with the Gandiva in its name. So you have to wait till turn 4 if you don't see your mask. It also has the ability to bind a card from your drop zone face down whenever you retire an opponent's rear guard. Every time for each face down card in your bind zone, your front row gets 2k. However, he doesn't get the extra crit at 5 cards face down in bind zone. Secondly, once per turn, you can exile a Gandiva from your hand, soul or drop, in order to gain that Gandiva's axe skill for no cost, and he gets a crit. So that's how you get your crit pressure instead. You will just exile your Gandiva, and now he gets a crit. This doesn't care about your opponent's grade, by the way, so you can do this on your turn 3 while they're on a grade 2 Vanguard, and sure, you'll lose out on like the power that comes from the Mask Persona ride, but you're also going to be getting a bigger bind zone, and you're just swinging with a crit Vanguard, which is really good for those hands where you can't get to 5 cards in bind zone turn 3 with Gandiva. This just helps you get there. And then lastly, once per turn, you can Soul Blast 1 to choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retire it, and if you don't, you draw a card. So it also just gets you a free +1 if you clear out your opponent's board, which is not impossible to do with this deck now, because between these two, unless like your top 5 certain reveals are very bad, you should be able to clear most of your opponent's board out. And even then, you don't really mind if you don't get the draw, because you have a very important rear guard that wants an opponent's board to be completely clear. Then for the remaining grade 3s, 2 copies of Bravo Den and 2 copies of Sturgurna. Sturgurna does help for your early game. If they ever put this guy up to like more than 2 copies, I'm very curious to see what this deck does, because like you can make the argument for just not playing masks anymore and just going pure and playing like old style Gandiva and just run a higher non-engine. But we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if they just print a new Gandiva ride line in grade 3 first. Anyway, on to the grade 2s. And the most important one for the deck, which is your Dragon Tree Reg. So this guy is phenomenal, and a lot of mass decks would benefit from a clone from this, as his effect is, when placed on rearguard, you Energy Blast 3 and just add the Mask of Hydrocom from your deck to your hand. So, gets the mask for energy, which is really great, because, again, you are actually fairly resource light with this deck. Aside from this guy and one other card in the deck, you don't use a lot of energy, too. His other effect is, once per counter +1, you can bind it to look at the top 7 cards of your deck for a Masks unit or Dragon Tree. No, what's his name? Grifflegila, my bad. However, if you have no copies of this guy face up in your bind zone, you could search the whole deck instead. So this one card for a Counterblast and an Energy Blast 3 gets you your Mask and your grade 3 Mask as well. So like it sets you up for your combo right away, and this is the thing you hard mulligan for as much as you can. as it allows you to get rolling. By the way, when you use that effect to bind itself to search, you also place a dragon tree marker down. So your units on that circle get an extra 5, which is actually relevant for scaling some numbers. Then, an equally important grade 2 and one you want to see as early as you can is Drag Rigger Durgam. So this is a card that Gandiva got in DZ set 2, and it allowed this deck to become more aggressive in the early game, as its effect is when it's placed and you have a Gandiva or Eugene Vanguard, you can Energy Blast 3 and Soul Blast 1 to pop whenever opponent's rear guards. But if they have nothing to kill, instead you draw a card and he gets a new skill of at the end of the battle of your Vanguard attack, you stand one of your front row rear guards. It could be anything in the front row, including himself, and it doesn't care about your opponent's grade. So this means if you've won the die roll and it's your turn 3 and they're grade 2, and you open with a couple of these guys, you just get to hit your opponent with 5 attacks to the face. Anywhere between 3 to 5 attacks. And this guy is insane for when you're going first. And then his other effect is during a turn you've played an order, he gets boost, which is relevant for when you play the Masques. It was much more relevant back when the deck was playing Best Harvest, because you were playing that all the time, but this deck doesn't play Best Harvest because you already draw enough through your engine. Then, speaking of multi-attackers, we've also still got one of Gandiva's OG guys for that, Alcafar. When your Gandiva attacks and your opponent's grade 3 or greater, you can counterblast 1, bind him face down, look at top 5, and call a guy. Now, what's really funny with these two is how they interact, because if you say you've got a Durgam on one side and you've got something else on the other side, no, hang on. So if say you've got this setup with your Gandiva, so you go swing, and then you on swing, counterblast 1, bind this guy face down. If you happen to hit a Durgam off this, he does proc, and then afterwards you do your drive checks. So, and then after that battle, Durgam restands this, which is actually silly. I've done it just enough times to know that interaction is relevant. Also, if you hit the if you hit the over trigger, it's also silly because this guy doesn't lock you to what you call, so he can call another copy of himself, and if you hit Drag Veda to restand Gandiva, this guy goes off again. That legitimately happened in my last round at locals with this deck, and how I managed to blow my opponent out. It was wild. So yeah, that's it for the main engine grade 2s. And then for my one piece of non-engine, I'm playing the Ace unit for Dragon Empire, whose skill is when placed, except during the battle phase, you enter the last 3 and target one of your opponent's circles and just pop everything on the circle while removing their ability. So in negate, basically you target one of your opponent's circles, negate the effects of all monsters on the circle, and retire everything. It's guaranteed removal. You draw a card as well, and it gets 5k. And then when it attacks a grade 3 Vanguard, I believe. Oh no, if it attacks and your opponent's on a grade 3 greater Vanguard, he gets 5k, and if you killed something this turn, he gets 5k more on top of that. So it's just a big attacker, and a deck that benefits from you killing your opponent's cards, which is what this deck does. Then for the grade 1s, for the only real grade 1 I'm playing, I am playing 4 copies of Drag Rider Gandeeva. So his effect is when he's placed on rearguard and you have a Scarlet Flame Vanguard, so your entire ride line, you Soul Blast 1, look at top 7, and add a grade 3 card that's not a Regalis piece to your hand. And if you do, you bind a card to your hand face down. It's unfortunate that he does that, because it would have been, I think would have been fine if it was just a straight +1. The fact that there is now a triple rare that does the same thing but for a counterblast and just adds a grade 3 from the top 7 shows such. That being said, she's a counterblast, this is Soul Blast, and you do build up soul for amount, and it does build up your bind. It's just, yeah, I kind of wish this was just a little more neggy. His other effect is if something in his column either restands or gets called in the same column in the battle phase, then he can stand himself up. So with Durgam and Alcafar, he's a restanding booster. At the end of the turn, though, he goes into soul if you use that effect, so it does replenish soul. It's fine. Now, I will say that if you happen to own Shenris, You can cut down on this from anywhere between 3 to 2 copies, as well as a couple other cards in the deck, and play her instead, because Shenri is just a fantastic card. She helps you in early games, so this is kind of... And if you play Shenri, you can play the Virgilis grade 1, but I know not everyone really has access to Shenri's even after her reprint. That does change in a couple weeks when we get the Virgila trial deck. Then Shenri becomes a lot more accessible, but we don't quite have that yet. And for the rest of the deck, it's just defensives and generics and triggers, really. 3 PGs and the Blitz Order, because we do have the occasional strike deck here. 2 copies of the Mask of Hydrocum, that's all you need. And then for triggers, it's nothing you haven't seen before. Dragon Empire, just max out on crits, max out on heals, play fronts because your front row can get even bigger, and then the Dragon Empire over trigger because Dragon Veda is insane. And it really should just be banned in a lot of decks at this point, because so many Dragon Empire decks now have like Vanguards that get extra crit, and just seeing this guy on any of the turns can blow games out. Like even with Vermilion, Dragon Veda can just blow your opponent out on turn 3. And yeah, that is it for the deck profile itself. As far as like plays go, like this isn't a fairly complicated deck to pilot as far as I'm seeing it, because like it's just seeing one of these, seeing one of these, seeing these. Like you want to see these more than anything else, because they're your engine, they get you rolling, and you want to see these as well as the game goes on. Like you don't want to see too much engine, because then you're not seeing, you know, like defensives. But if you have a hand like this and like some triggers, you've got a fairly good turn 3 coming up, as you'll have the mask combo. You'll be able to get some multi-attacks off, and you'll be drawing a fair amount of cards too. All in all, I'm actually kind of content with what they did. When I first saw Gandiva Masques, I was very skeptical. In fact, there's a comment I made on W Slasher's video of the initial reveal saying that I think Stigurna going to 4 would have been better than this entire thing, but I've had a change of heart after playing a fair amount of games with this deck. Also, I do like the fact that you can build this deck without having to rely too much on generics to fill in holes, just because its engine is large and pretty efficient at what it does. So that being said, if you are looking for a deck to play that will not break your bank too much, I'd look into Gandiva, as I think most of the cards are still fairly inexpensive, because it's support for a deck that's like 3+ years old now. And Gandiva Masques itself was fairly cheap when it came out. The mask itself has been reprinted a couple times, so I think, yeah, this would be a pretty solid pickup for anyone who doesn't want to like throw a ton of money into something like Bob Sakura or even Virgila at this point. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and until next time, this is Blue Star 9 checking out. Let's just see what we have for a start hand. Now that's definitely a me hand here. I think we'll keep these and try and like fish for better stuff. Okay, this isn't bad. Hopefully the Ganem will hit Gandiva Masques, because that's basically what you're looking for at this point. Whoops. Let's just see what we got here. So let's draw for our turn. Oh, okay, Gandiva Masques. So that means the mask is now a discard. So we'll do just that. Right into him. Probably pass. And they swing, no triggers, so we'll have to take a hit. Plus, if we see Dragon Tree Wretch, it benefits us. Defensive, okay, so they shouldn't be able to rush it down. Draw for turn. Durgam, okay. So They most likely don't have anything on board, so you just ride this guy for free. And now you can justify pushing a little. Call Soul Blast 1. Let's look at our top 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we got a Gandiva mat. Oh, we got a Gandiva. Let's take the Gandiva. I think in this instance, for our hand, we will bind Alcohol face down because he doesn't do anything on unless your opponent's a grade 3 or greater. So we'll bind him. And then we don't want to put that behind Vanguard in the back. The thing is though, the thing I've noticed is that Durgam, you don't have as many things you want to like dive, because like if this doesn't stay on the board and then we go to the next turn, I have nothing to bind for Durgam's skill, so I almost kind of want to keep this in the back and not rush my opponent. That way, yeah, maybe we just do that. We swing, we hit a heal, cool. Go back to them. They know we're on Gandiva, so I imagine they'd be hesitant to rush, or they're like, fuck it, I'll go all in. And it's like, okay, cool, I'll just pop everything in response. So I'll probably take, let's assume we take a crit to the face. Off a turn, it's the mask. Yeah, we ditched the mask. And go into our boy Gandiva. So they most likely have a rear guard. So we'll use Gandiva's axe skill. I'm gonna assume it's a 2. Oh, cool. We hit Bravo then, so he counts as everything. So we'll pop, draw a card, and bind one face down. And because something was retired, we'll also bind one face down. So we're at 3. Call Durgam down. Stigurna, Soul Blast 1. Bind this guy face down. Attempt to retire something, nothing to retire, so we spill our deck over. Draw a card. And bind a card from our drop zone face down. So we're now at 5 cards face down in drop zone already. So Gandiva gets his crit. And what did we draw? We drew a Mask Searcher. Ooh. So we now have a beater. But more importantly, what we can do here is really rush our opponent down. I almost kind of don't want to use the masks here and just save Gandiva Mask for the next turn, because we already have our extra crit. Our front row's at +10. All we would be doing is just getting an extra 2 on top of that. I mean, we would get a draw 2 though. We would get a draw 2. Yeah, okay. We'll do it anyway, because we can use Crimwad to search Gandiva masks on the next turn. So we'll mask up and go into Gandiva masks. Actually, why would we do that? We have energy. We have 6 energy actually. We'll all activate skill, kind of +1, bind him, and just search another Gandiva masks. And we'll put a Dragon Tree marker down. Then we'll call Durgam down, Energy Blast 3, Soul Blast 1. Soul Blast out the base unit or the mask if you always can. Attempt to retire something, nothing to retire, draw a card, and we now get a restander. Okay. Then Gandiva masks. Since our opponent's got an empty board, we'll Soul Blast 1. Attempt to retire, nothing to retire, draw a card. Ooh, Alcafar. Okay, we have something for next turn. And then finally, we'll go Gandiva, exile Gandiva, and 2 top 5. Nothing. So now we get to just draw a card and bind one from our drop zone face down. Defensive, and at this point, you can bind one of the masks. So at 6 cards in bind, so our front row is at 10 plus 12k, and we just go straight into battle. So 13 plus 12, 25. That's a magic number. 15 plus 12, 27. And then finally, Gandiva attacks. See what we hit. Gandiva and Gandiva mask. Oh wow. Okay, that's a lot of 3s. They're most likely taking this to the face because they're grade 2 and you're at swing over 27. So it's either PG or throw over trigger or something. So they probably took it, and then at end of battle, you get to restand this guy and swing for 27. And that's your turn 3. And then, depending on what they do, hit defensive over trigger. Cool. So these guys will most likely die. What did we draw for that? Front trigger. Okay, cool. So go back to our turn, and then you just start doing like the engine thing. So they've probably got a board down now. So called Gandiva. We've only got 2 counterblasts to work with, but that's fine. We only have one thing that uses counterblast this turn. So Gandiva skill, counterblast 1, look at top 5. Okay, we hit all 3 grades, so we most likely pop 3 things. I'm only going to bind these 2 face down and leave the mask down. That way we can now persona ride into Gandiva mask. And we draw a card. So we've popped 3. Now we will have Gandiva masks. We're just going to exile the Gandiva right now. And let's see what we hit. Oh, cool. We hit a Bravo then, so we popped the other 3. So just like that, we've wiped their entire board. Which means we can now Soul Blast 1 for Gandiva masks to attempt to retire something. Nothing to retire, so we draw a card. And it's a Ganam. Cool. That's actually kind of relevant because we can try and hit a Gandiva off of it. So we're going to call him back there. Soul Blast Gandiva. No, I don't want to. I don't want to put that in my hand. I want to keep at least one Ganam in the deck so that my Gandiva reveals will potentially be a pop 3. So we're gonna whiff, but that's fine. We still have things we can do. So we can call Alcafar down here, and we do have a Ganam in hand, so we'll just call him down and get some cycles. And we'll go battle phase. So we'll swing with Ganam, and we'll use this skill to bind this guy from our hand face down to attempt to retire one of everyone's rear guards. Nothing to retire, so we'll draw a card, and he gets 5k. Then we'll swing with these 2, and then we'll swing with Gandiva, activate skill, card plus 1. We're trying to hit a Durgam. Let's see if we do. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We didn't hit a Durgam, unfortunate, but we did hit, we'll hit put down another Dragon Tree guy. Then skill, restand, and then Gandiva skill. Heal trigger, but more importantly, we have another Gandiva for the next turn. And then we just swing with these guys, and that's it. So unless your opponent is a goddamn sack or they managed to farm a super lot, you've probably killed them this turn. Like that's as good of a game as it gets for Gandiva. Your engine's just rolling, you're retiring, you're drawing. Yeah, like when Gandiva goes off, it's a beauty to watch. Its playstyle is very reminiscent to that of like old Narukami, or like this is basically Vanquisher and Blade Master rolled into one deck.